Hello and welcome back once again to the Inquisitor podcast with me, Marcus Cauchi. Today, my guest is Mike Lander. Mike is poacher turned gamekeeper. Well, actually, gamekeeper turned poacher.
I am.
So he's an ex-procurement director who's purchased, I think, north of $6 billion worth of product.
It's about $500 million, actually, yes.
$500 million. Okay, 500 million. What's a few billion between friends?
Exactly.
And he's been the other side. He now teaches salespeople what not to do in front of buyers. Today, we are going to approach it both from the perspective of the buyer and the seller. We're going to look at it through what to stop doing, i.e., what can you subtract first that doesn't work. Then we're going to look at what you can add that really delivers the outcome that you want. Because let's face it, we do some very stupid things in sales. For example, going cut. We all know it's a bit of a drudge, but if you do the mathematics of it, which we'll talk about in a minute, you'll see that it is a crushing waste of your life. And I don't know about you, but I have a view that you only have one of them and you're dead for a very long time afterwards. And the time that you do have is far too short to sell badly and spend it being told to boil your head, call back in 6 months, and other stuff that doesn't contribute. So we're taking a bit of the caveat venditor position. So seller beware. That's what today's episode is really about. Procurement is part of the day-to-day. If you sell to enterprise, you need to understand how to sell to them. The principles that Mike is going to talk about today are still relatable elsewhere, because as you'll discover, the way people filter when they're going to make an important decision is they first filter for risk. If they perceive it isn't going to work, or it's going to backfire, or it's going to make them look stupid or whatever, they will not move it forward. And risk is driven often by uncertainty. And mankind's greatest fear is not death, public speaking, or the dentist. It's the future, because with it comes uncertainty. We're creatures that look for patterns. So what we need to do as sellers is remove the uncertainty from our brain so we don't project it to the buyer's brain. And so we're going to start unpacking how you do that today. So without any more waffle from me, Mike Lander, welcome.
Thank you, Marcus. Really looking forward to this. We had an amazing time. I mean, I only met you literally a few kind of weeks, few months ago at that seminar we did with Marcus.
A month ago.
Yeah. And it was fantastic. I thought it was a really interesting dynamic in terms of, and we haven't prepared this bit, Marcus, at all. But I was going to say to you, what I've learned as I've developed in my own career is, because I have very specific subject matter expertise, which is quite narrow, but hopefully reasonably deep. What I've learned is the more natural I am in front of an audience and the more open I am to just talking and having a discussion and listening to questions, the better I seem to perform. And that environment that we had then, that panel, seemed to really ignite that in me.
It's interesting because one of the hypotheses I teach my clients is the best technique is no technique. We're taught to weaponize bonding and rapport and matching and mirroring, and we're taught to apply these ninja skills. Well, as a professional buyer, how many salespeople did you see in a week?
Oh, wow. I used to get probably 10 inbounds a day. That could be calls or emails. That's probably, what is that, 60, 70 probably a week. And I used to run about 3 meetings a day. So I'm seeing about 15 salespeople a week.
So 60 to 75 a month.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah.
So how many times were you aware that salespeople were using the latest tactic or technique on you, and they bumped an email, or they just asked for 30 seconds, or they tried some clever manipulative move?
All the time. I mean, literally, virtually. I would say, well, let's be fair. Over half the time that happens, I would say, tended to be from people that were less seasoned sales professionals. The ones where it didn't happen were people that were what I would call trust builders. I've got a guy in mind, Malcolm. Malcolm was brilliant. Malcolm was a main board director at a very large recruitment company, like huge recruitment company. He was a super smart bloke. And Malcolm never tried to sell to me ever. Malcolm was just very good at tuning in, listening, not being a pushover at all, very good at pushing back when I pushed too far, but very good at just building a relationship and a value creating relationship. He knew how to do it.
I'm curious, how self-aware was Malcolm?
Oh,
And how
massively.
strong was his self-concept?
Self-aware, massively self-aware. He knew how he impacted other people, how language impacted other people, how his presence, how his behaviors. I.e., if you'd booked a meeting, Malcolm went to the meeting. He didn't send his junior, didn't send an oppo. If he couldn't attend the meeting, he'd ring me in advance, reschedule it, because he knew that was important to me. So he was really, really, really self-aware.
So tell me this, what was more important to you at the start of the relationship? His credibility or his level of self-orientation?
Interesting question. In that scenario, given who he worked for as an organization, the credibility had kind of been done for years and years and years.
So that was a given.
Yeah, we knew them as an organization. So as a buying organization, we knew them really well. We'd known them for many years. This was about stepping up the depth of the relationship, to be honest, is that we were building programs to build basically deeper, stronger partnerships with fewer key suppliers. And Malcolm was sent in to do that.
Were there other suppliers similar to Malcolm's that didn't build that relationship and didn't earn the intimacy that Malcolm clearly did?
Definitely.
And when they called, were you excited to receive their phone call?
What, when the people that weren't Malcolm called?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't answer the phone.
And when Malcolm called?
Yeah, I always answered the phone.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I always answered the phone.
Always answered the phone. And what was your expectation when Malcolm called?
There'd be something important. He'd bring some value to the table. So for example, simple thing, Marcus, simple thing. Yeah. He would try and bring us business where he could.
Lovely. So he always put you first, and he put the relationship before self-interest and short-term gain. He always came with something that was timely, that was relevant, that was personally valuable to you, that helped you clear the fog and understand what was possible, what wasn't, what was within your grasp and what wasn't. So whether you could actually act on that. And always moved you towards making the right decision for yourself, never for him.
Yeah. And also, one thing that you didn't specifically say, but was very important, was he was very good at solving problems for us. If we had a problem with their organization, once we started working together, I didn't call Malcolm all the time about it, but if it got to a point whereby it was a big irritation to me, my colleagues, and our business, and it had gone up the tree, I'd just call Malcolm and we'd have a 2-minute conversation. And he'd say, "Let me look into it, Mike. I will resolve this for you." And then he'd go away. And then about, could be a day later, could be a week later, he'd come back with an answer. Thought about it, talk to people, gather the data. This is what happened. And there'd be a resolution.
Okay, so how did that affect his credibility in your eyes?
And the relationship got better and better. In fact, what I might do after this call is I might well give him a ring, because I've not spoken to him for a while.
I'm so delighted that would be an output. That's made my day. Okay, and in terms of reinforcing his perceived level of reliability, I'm guessing that's a yes to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and what did that do to remove risk and uncertainty from your mind?
As an ex-buyer, we think about risk in different buckets. So there's reputational risk, there's operational risk, there's financial risk. So I think sellers need to understand, when I talk about risk, you need to ask me, what type of risk are you thinking about, Mike? Most sellers wouldn't even talk about risk because they see it as being a negative to selling. Those that get through that barrier and go, no, actually, it's important because risk is important to a buyer, they fail to get to, well, what kind of risk are we talking about here? Is it perceived or actual? Is it financial or operational? What risk are we talking about?
Now, I'm coming slightly off piste here, but I think this is going to be a really interesting line of discussion. When Malcolm and you talked about risk,
Yeah.
was Malcolm focused on the outcome that you wanted, or was he constantly pressing your pain?
I know he was very focused on the outcome. We'd have a combined view of what the outcome looks like. For example, if you want to set up operations in a foreign territory,
Swaziland.
Yeah, exactly. Anywhere. Can be anywhere in the world, which has got difficult regulatory environments, which are complex, and you need to be local to it. We talk about, well, the risk of this going wrong is really, really critical because it can go wrong financially, operationally, reputationally, and we'd work together on that.
If I understand it correctly, Malcolm and you co-developed an understanding of not only the problem, but the context.
Yep.
He helped you see around corners and into the dark nooks and crannies, but also prepared you for what was to come and co-developed a plan that had your voice and your fingerprints all over it. Tell me something. When other people came in to sell against that, what were they selling? Were they on the credibility side?
I mean, it's virtually impossible for them to do that. I mean, like you, Marcus, when I'm training people in negotiation skills, there's a critical piece around solution building. So if you look at a procurement kind of director, look at a procurement person about how they negotiate, and you think about this kind of Kraljek matrix, which we've talked about before as well. If you find yourself in a negotiation with a buyer, a procurement person, and you don't impact their business very much in terms of increasing profit or sales, and there's a huge number of suppliers in the marketplace, don't be surprised if I treat you as a commodity, because you are a commodity in my eyes, because you add low value and there's lots of you. Instead, if you face me as a negotiator, and I'll be in that situation, I'll be aggressive probably, I'll be blunt, it'll be a very short conversation, and I'll be trying to claim a lot of value in that conversation because it's a commodity purchase. If you then look at a different scenario, you create huge amounts of value for our business, lots of sales or profit, hopefully both, and there are very few of you in the marketplace. In fact, there might only be one or two of you in the marketplace. You've become strategically important to me. I will now collaborate with you. So I will now open the kimono and start to say, these are my problems. These are our goals. These are our perceived risks. What solutions could we co-create? How could we share some of that risk together and some of the upside reward? Once you're in that box, for another supplier to come in and knock that person off, it's not impossible, but you're in very, very rarefied atmosphere to get someone to switch at that point, because the switching risk is colossal.
Well, the syntax, as I said right at the beginning, is remove risk, then look at opportunity cost, and way, way, way down is value. Because if Mike's brain tells him that you're a threat or you're a commodity and there's no real value in spending time with you, he's not going to waste that time. If, on the other hand, he sees the upside and you have created the conditions over time when he was passively looking, and at no point did you coerce, try and sell, put him under any false pressure, because I know that's one of his favorite bugbears. And there's a reason why you don't put the buyer under false pressure, because you trigger the insular succumbens, and the insula is where disgust and contempt reside. You don't want to do that. If you create a perception of risk in a buyer's mind, what you actually do is you help them anticipate buyer's remorse. And the memory will still be there when you leave of them buying from you and then it backfiring into their face. That's not a good thing to leave them anchored with. Now, what Martin did was the absolute antithesis of that. He created the conditions where you felt safe. And it was because he brought you value on every touch through his intimacy with the market, his intimacy with the business, and the patience that he took to understand all the different moving parts and try to understand what the business was trying to achieve, what each individual was trying to achieve. Because he didn't just align with you, did he?
No.
He aligned with everybody else in the decision-making committee. And I'm guessing there were probably somewhere between 6 and 12.
Yeah. So in this one, there's probably, more like 6 in this one. Yeah. But he knew all of those people.
And when was this?
This was going back to 2000 and probably 2011, 12, I think, from memory.
Well, the data's changed since then, and it's now an average of 12 to 16 people involved in the evaluation committee, the decision-making committee, and then the allocation committee. Once we get past and we've got the sale and someone said yes, we still have to get approval.
Yeah.
That's where you come in. Well, if you've done the job with Mike beforehand, you don't have to do that sort of stuff, do you?
So, Marcus, this is a real bugbear. So as an ex-buyer, oh my God. So imagine a scenario. So one of
I'm
your
going
friends...
on mute so I can't interrupt.
That's fine. One of your friends has been selling into an organization, and it started 9 months ago, and they met a marketing director, and they started working on an idea together, and the idea turned into an opportunity, and the opportunity turned into something that was bigger, and it was now worth $500,000. And everyone got very excited. And you'd spoken to not just the marketing director, but some of their colleagues, and in fact, some of the country managers in different countries. It was all going really, really well. And this friend of yours was telling you a story over a coffee in a cafe. And then it went really horribly wrong. And you said to him, what happened? And he said, well, we got this deal structured. It took us a year to get it. It's worth $500,000. And it was a big relationship and could have gone on for years. And then the guy said, well, of course, you will have to talk to procurement about this. It's $500,000. It's a lot of money. So I went to go and see procurement. And this wrath of anger from procurement turned up, which was like, right, so we've got a preferred suppliers list. We've got 5 agencies that look exactly like you on it. We've spent years building relationships with them and de-risking solutions. And you think you can walk in at the last minute and just do a $500,000 deal with me? Thank you. I'll go and talk to the marketing director. We'll be in touch. And then it goes silent. And then they do get ghosted, because now I'm really pissed. So now I talk to the marketing director going, why did it get to this level? I've got 10 other projects on my list at the moment. This turns up. So you've clearly got a problem that you hadn't talked to me about. And I've got other agencies that could well serve. Why did you start building a relationship with them? Well, he was very friendly, and they've got something different, and we were quite interested, and it got a bit out of hand, and I should have really contacted you earlier. But could we do something with them? I'm like, no. What we'll do is we'll run a process. They might be on the list, but we're going to run a process. And in that moment, a year's worth of sales effort went down the toilet. That's what irritates me. There we go.
It's a shame, really, because it could all have been avoided, couldn't it?
Correct. Completely avoidable.
Before.
Had they engaged me at the beginning with the marketing director, after the first month or so of conversations, saying there is a different problem we're trying to solve here. We haven't solved this problem before. And this agency's got an interesting perspective on this. Mike, could you join us for a conversation? Yeah, sure. It's worth $500,000. It's going to create $5 million of value for us. There's a 10-to-1 ROI. Yeah, I'm interested. Yeah, that's got my attention.
It's just insane, the amount of opportunity that we waste. I was chatting to, who was it? He was in the procurement team at General Motors. Now, GM is a really interesting organization because they developed a methodology, which you might be familiar with, called PICOS, P-I-C-O-S.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Well, the guy who developed it used to be the head meat buyer for Walmart.
Right.
So he learnt his craft buying from abattoir owners. And PICOS is 120 ways to get salespeople to give away all of the margin and more before you get to the negotiating table.
Right.
It's a brilliantly clever system, but it's predictable. And when you know the amount of effort that procurement have to go through to develop a proper RFP, they really don't want that to be derailed. But if you can help them create the RFP that makes them the hero.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And this is where sales gets it wrong, because salespeople think that their job is to be the hero. It's not. Your job is to clear the space of heroes so it creates a vacuum so your customer can be the hero. And who do you really want to be the hero in your target accounts but procurement and finance? Look at the world through the lens of them first, not the people who use your stuff, but think about the job to be done that the business is trying to accomplish. Because finance looks at the world, first of all, through a filter of risk.
Mm.
All risk, internal and external. The CFO is a professional paranoid. It's their job to prevent risk. The second thing is capital protection. They don't want to start out at 100 million and end up at 99. They look silly. They want to make sure that they're protecting against loss first, then growth comes a poor third. You will notice this is identical to the syntax of risk, opportunity, cost, value, which is the same as investors if you're going for funding. Is my money safe with you? Risk. Will I get it back? And if I invest it with you, is there somewhere better that I could invest it in? This is just how the human brain works, which is why you need to give up technique and focus on the fundamentals of human communication, which are self-concept and self-awareness, understanding that you have rights and boundaries that you need to be clear about, because if you don't know what they are, you can't structure them and enforce them. And you need to be able to create parity with the customer. Did you ever feel that you were Martin's superior, or did you feel like he was your ally?
It was always for me an ally. I mean, I used to work very hard, whichever department I was working with, and I worked across departments and indirect. I hope one of my strengths was I was very good at building relationships with stakeholders. Because as I said yesterday to the audience of people at a conference, whose money is it? Because it's not mine. It may seem like it's procurement's money. It's not my money. The budget holder's money. But I, however, the guardian, the protector, the evaluator, and the guide for them spending that money.
Okay, question. Why does procurement exist?
I think there's some really simple, clear reasons why we exist. Governance, the larger the company, the more important governance gets, especially in public companies. It's not their money, it's investors' money. So you have to have some way of saying, has there been an impartial view of the way that we're spending this money? As far as we can tell, yes, there is. Whereas the procurement didn't exist and you allowed all the budget holders to spend money as they wished with no governance, well, that could lead to catastrophic results.
Catastrophic such as?
The list is endless, Marcus. So, for example, go back to, do you remember the horse meat scandal?
Yeah, Tesco.
Was it Tesco, was it?
Tesco meat pies.
And that was because I believe the supply chain hadn't been audited appropriately. Now, but very good, Marcus. Part of procurement's job is to ensure that, as far as we can, we've checked the supply chain. I'm not just checking you as a supplier, I'm checking what sits behind you. Why do we have back-to-back contracts? There's a very good reason. Because we want to make sure.
Back-to-back contracts?
If I do a deal with you and your organization, but you're using third-party suppliers, I need to make sure that my terms are passed on down the chain. I also need to find out, who are these third-party suppliers? Are they ethical suppliers that you're working with? I also want to find out, which there's a bit of a gray area here, about margin. You'll see in a lot of contracts from pharmaceutical companies and automotive, there'll be a clause in the contract saying no third-party markup. Now, I don't believe that's right personally, because if you're a supplier and you've got a supply chain and I want you to manage that supply chain to bring the best solution, you should reasonably get a margin for that. Some way of managing the third party and also accepting the risk because you're the prime supplier.
I saw a contract that came from Telefonica. And what was interesting was it seems that they stole the terms and conditions of one of my clients,
right,
and then turned them into a PCOS version, where up until the day before the end of the contract, they could say that you failed to meet your terms and then refused to pay.
Right.
They wanted people to put £1 million into escrow
Into escrow. Yeah.
to keep them honest for them.
Exactly.
I mean, what sort of mug would buy that sort of deal?
Exactly.
It's just horrific.
Well, another one, Marcus, another great. So for your salespeople in the audience, so they'll spend 6 months negotiating this deal, negotiating a deal, getting to the final terms. And it's a 3-year contract and it's got SLAs and all sorts in it. And of course, in the contract it's a 3-year contract, but we have termination for convenience rights.
Yeah.
So we can terminate whenever we like.
Yeah.
For no reason.
I had a client once who, before we worked together, had pursued BT, and she'd been tempted by the baited hook. And over about 18 months, she had invested about 100 grand, got onto the preferred supplier list, crickets.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Correct.
So it's all very well and good going on the PSL, but
if
you've
no
got
work
to have
turns
a
up,
reason for them to buy from you.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay. Oh, this is excruciatingly wonderful. I've been thoroughly enjoying this conversation. Okay. So let's get back to some fundamentals around the buying process. Just so the audience is aware, you're just about to establish a real RFP, not one of these pretend ones just to test the market.
Yeah.
But real RFP. Talk me through the syntax and the work that goes into that.
Let's say we're going to spend, let's say it's £300,000. So a decent chunk of money per annum. And it might go on for a few years. So I'm going to take it seriously. Anything, it used to be anything above 100 grand gets my attention. I think now it's 50. I think the threshold's dropped because of the environment.
So there's a 50% lower threshold before there's a trigger to go to procurement.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, let's say it's 300 grand, say. It will take me at best about 4 weeks to create that RFP. That's probably the quickest I'd do.
How many full-time employees would be involved?
Well, if you look at the number of stakeholders involved rather than kind of the FTE, that probably for a deal that size, there's probably a dozen people that have touched that as a minimum, I would expect.
And their hourly contribution to the outcome of the job to be done?
Oh, God, difficult to tell. Let's say it's £1,000 an hour, say.
Okay. And how many hours over those 12 people in total?
On a deal of that kind of size, I'm probably going to invest probably a week of my time, maybe, in pulling that together.
That's 40 hours.
Yeah, I'd say.
That's
and then you could probably say across all the other stakeholders, maybe something similar.
So it's 80 grand just to get the thing written.
Yeah, maybe 50 grand, but of that order. Yeah. It's an expensive exercise. Okay. It's not to be done lightly.
Okay. Well, so you've sunk 50K into creating this masterwork.
Of opportunity
what happens
cost.
Then?
Yeah. So before, obviously, I send it out, I've got to work out who I'm going to send it out to. So in the ideal world, what's happened is we've got this 300 grand we're going to spend, and we're going to spend that for 3 years. So you're probably at £1 million worth of spend that we're going to broadly commit to. So I've cleared that with the CFO, and we broadly agreed that's what's going to happen, and the budget holders are all aligned and everything else. But at the beginning, what's happened is the problem we're trying to fix, because it's obviously a problem we're trying to fix, or an opportunity we're trying to deliver against. We're saying we're going to spend 300 grand a year with some third party, and we're going to get 3 million a year back, or else why would we bother? So we've done the value calculation somewhere. In the ideal scenario, there's a supplier that we've known and that we trust that has solved this problem before, many times before, in our sector, has got amazing credentials, and we trust them. And they've helped me write that RFP because I've been ringing them going, right, okay, Marcus, I'm writing this RFP. You know what it's about. I've talked to you about it before. I'm stuck on section 3, which is about how do we get regulatory approval in certain countries. So what should I put in the RFP to make sure that whoever responds, I can check that they've actually got the credentials to do this? And you tell me and you give me the words and I'd stick it in. So I wouldn't give you the RFP to write, but I'd ask you the right questions so that your words appear in the RFP. Well, you then get to the point of going, okay, so who do I send it to? Well, Marcus's company clearly is going to get the RFP. Great. Who else gets it? So I want it to go to 5 organizations, often 7, but let's call it 5. Marcus is one. Okay. 2 others. Who else did we work with in the last 3 years that can solve this kind of problem? These 2 agencies. All right, fine. We'll use them too as well. I've got 3 now. I've got 3 on my list. I need 2 more. Oh, Google. Oh, ChatGPT. Oh, all right. Let me have a look. And I type in a few keywords and I come up with a few suppliers. And I go, well, they look interesting. I've checked them out a bit and I've run the credit reports and I might have made a phone call to see if they're real. And, they check out and someone's got very excited on the end of the phone, normally a sales director, and they're now on the list. So I've got 5. So it goes out to 5. I then run my process. I won't bore you with the process. I'll get to the result. What happens at the end? Marcus gets appointed. Surprise, surprise. And not for the lowest price, by the way.
No, because you're getting the value that you intended. I was just talking to a client earlier today, and it's so beautiful when you do this because they're David against the many Goliaths out in their marketplace, but they're outthinking them because they're focused entirely on creating the outcome that the customer wants. They're slowing everything right down. What's really interesting is the credibility that he's gained internally. He's got a meeting. In fact, he's in the meeting as we speak with the CEO, the CFO, and the head of his division worldwide, and the regional directors so that they can work out how they can pump more into his part of the business.
Right.
Because the process that he's been applying to the customers, he's also been applying internally because you're just dealing with human beings.
Yeah.
That's why the building blocks of sales are self-concept and really understanding how you show up, deep listening, really powerful questioning, contextual awareness and situational fluency. So this is EQ, then being able to bundle it all together whilst putting your ego and your pressure to perform to one side and still be able to satisfy your bosses, your customers, your partners, and achieve what you want in life.
Yeah.
Now, that takes discipline to get the attachment out of the way. And I'm guessing Martin demonstrated a huge amount of humility. He never told you that he knew something when he didn't. And
Correct.
not once did he ever lie to you or bullshit.
No, exactly. And also, what's interesting is, and again, sellers, this might not resonate with a lot of sellers, but it's absolutely true. It wasn't about the answer that he gave. It was normally about the way he considered the question and reframed the question. So it was the ability to think the problem through is what I valued. Because I knew ultimately we would come to a resolution. We'd find a solution.
He was a thought partner.
Yeah, he was. Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Interestingly enough, the same process can be applied in the recruitment process, whether you're recruiting customers or staff or partners. If you employ the same type of critical, consequential, compassionate thinking, and it is focused on the outcome that the customer wants,
Yep.
and then the outcomes that everybody else wants and all the stakeholders, it requires a bit of thinking and patience. But AI allows us to do this. One of the things that I'm most excited about, and I am going to have to do a little bit of crowing here, is I'm creating basically a digital twin. All my coaching, every transcript that they ever have with a customer, we anonymize and we put in. The tool can already do pre-call planning, post-call debriefing. It can tear apart their hypothesis before they go in. It can deal with what objections they're going to come up with. They can rehearse with it. And that was the beta version before we've actually got the really good stuff in. What we're then integrating is all the other stuff, the stuff that's intrinsically important to them, their personal goals, their company goals, their behaviors, their cookbook, all of this stuff. It's just breathtaking what's possible today.
Correct. Yep.
Now, this minute.
Exactly.
And if you choreograph this correctly, it's perfectly possible to add 200% to the bottom of your pipeline with ICP prospects who are motivated to buy and use that 120-day cycle to build the basis for being able to move your close rate from 1 to 3% to around a baseline of 20, going north of 85. It'll take about 18 months to 2 years to get to the 85, but
It will, correct.
Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you don't even have to involve sales and marketing for the first 6 to 8 months. So they can't throw up their hands and grumble and complain about how it's going to impact them. All what we want is to create professional jealousy. So they're looking over the fence saying, why is it these people are making more money than me? This has been such a fascinating conversation, Mike.
It's been really enjoyable, Marcus. It's been really enjoyable.
Oh,
it's been great.
God. Look, we need to do more of this.
Yep.
I think what we should do, and again, listeners, write in. What we want are tales of woe.
Yep.
We want the stuff that got you stuck, and we'll dissect it. We won't actually name and shame you, but what we'll do is we'll dissect how you got there, and we'll develop this caveat venditor series, I think, if you're game.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
As sellers, we do some horrific things. If you haven't seen it, check out the post on my LinkedIn profile where I put into ChatGPT 3.5 so you can emulate it for free. Create the most cost-ineffective, unproductive, soul-destroying go-to-market methodology you possibly can, and ensure that the outcomes are as unproductive as possible. And it creates the modern go-to-market system.
Right.
Try a couple of other ones with the AI as well, which are really good fun. So you are an alien anthropologist, and then critique this, whatever it happens to be. So it can be your business plan, it can be your ethical code, your values, whatever. But that's really painful. And my most favoritist of all is you are my board of detractors. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Right.
I can't get pissy with a piece of AI.
Exactly.
I get offended, but that's just my ego. So,
I mean, what's interesting, Marcus, is I'm doing, and we've talked about this, I'm also building a AI-enabled product at the moment around proposal management. So what's the biggest pain points that a lot of salespeople have is the blank sheet. Yeah. So I'm building a system currently, which where are we now? We're June 2024. We've got the POC just about ready. And it will do things like, it will look at all of your past proposals matched with your briefs or RFPs and analyze why you won and why you lost. If you tell it if you tag it win or lose, it will then bring out all the themes. Now, I was talking to my AI partner about it, my business partner, and we were saying, a lot of people say, well, how does it do that? That's bonkers. And we said, well, look, if you employed an intern for a year and said to them, all I want you to do is look at all of my past proposals and my past wins and losses and work out why we won and why we lost, could they do it? And they were like, well, yeah, because we'd give them access to information and they'd do some work and then we'd review the work and we'd check it and then we give them feedback and then they'd get better and better. I'm like, yeah, that's what we're doing with the AI.
That's what an LLM is.
Correct.
So, and again, what's really interesting is being able to create very precise outcome agents.
Exactly.
And what I love about the potential of this is that we can create a thought partner that creates the habit at an unconscious level.
Yeah.
Now,
and give it a persona. We can give it a persona of the types of people. So in my world, when it'll write for you the first draft of the proposal, I can give you as a client, if you were one of the clients of the tool, I can say to you, Marcus, what's the ICP that you're aiming this proposal at? Give me a persona. I can put the persona
might be a tricky question for most of them to answer, in fairness.
Right. But if you've got a persona and you can say, well, this is aimed at a pharmaceutical company, they're global, it's in their consumer healthcare division, and it's, I don't know, focused on the UK particular business.
Yeah,
if you give it, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And these are the kind of people that will be reading it, it'll be marketing directors. And if you give it enough, it can then write the proposal first draft in a way which resonates with that kind of audience. The big thing here is, I believe, in yours as well, is you can't just get our tool to write the proposal and then hit send. That would be insane. It's a thought starter. It's going to help you get 80% of the way in half an hour. And then you add the real value on top based on your insights. That's what I think we're aiming for.
Very interesting. So tell me this, what are you doing to prepare your clients for what's to come?
I've been selling I've been selling my services for many, many years, as I think we've spoken about before, probably 30 odd years now. And this is, I think, the first time that I've got a list of 30 people who are all agency leaders. I work with a lot of marketing agencies. So agency leaders, agency chief commercial officers, heads of growth, that have all said within 3 minutes of a conversation, please put me on the list to have a look at what you're doing. We're very, very, very interested. We've tried to solve this problem using the private version of ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot. We've really struggled. Can you show us what you've done? So it's the first time in my sales career, probably, where I've had everyone gets it. Everyone knows that there's an AI solution out there, but no one's been able to really develop it themselves. So they're fascinated by, as soon as you've got something to show us, Mike, we'd be delighted to have a listen, a look, because they've got, to your point, there's a real problem. And I'm not trying to sell them something. I'm saying we've built something that might be interesting. And they've gone, we've got that problem in bucket loads. We've tried something before, it's not worked. So we're fascinated to see how you've done it and if it works. All right, I'll show you what we've done then.
Well, and this is where there's a really interesting shift in thinking, and it requires a bit of courage on behalf of the leaders or the founders and to empower the salespeople. But in most businesses, there's a very competitive, very protective, very closed type of approach. Interestingly enough, generationally, that doesn't really work very well. And we've seen it reflected in the fact that 73% of Gen Z surveyed last year said that they'd ghosted an employer, either a current one or a prospective one, because the contract between employers and employees seems to have been very badly broken, certainly within.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've got this income inequality gap, which is growing. Incomes are now back to spending power of the 1970s. In the last 4 years, 7% of the wealth of the middle class was extracted and put in the hands of the 1%. Now, this isn't political, this is simple economics. The global economy rounds off to zero. There are creditors, a tiny handful, and debtors, every government and every citizen. Whether you have personal debt or not, you have government-induced debt. During the COVID payouts, apparently every man, woman, and child in the United Kingdom got £14,000. Did you or any of your family see any of that money?
None, zero.
Someone else did, and it wasn't us. Now, what's interesting is that by getting more and more wealth, their money has to go out and grow because they've invested. And the more they invest it, the more it inflates asset classes. Well, the asset class that they've chosen is retail property, among other things. And the net result of that is we're dealing with a generation whose parents own a home and they never will. There's this breach of trust. So
Yeah.
I think we're at a turning point in society. I'm a big fan of The Fourth Turning and by Strauss and Howe, and Making Sense of the Changing World Order by Ray Dalio.
Ray Dalio.
Both of those talk about these cycles, historical and economic, hitting a bottom and an nadir this year and over the next 6 to 8 years. So in The Fourth Turning, they talk about a millennial crisis that started in 2008 and it's peaking now. Well, if you look back in history and you look back at the social changes that we're seeing, they mirror the 1920s and 1930s with remarkable and alarming similarity. That didn't end well.
No, it didn't.
And I've spent the last 7 years creating an approach that is anti-fragile and ready for that. Because what I've seen in the previous 7 recessions that I've lived through is that people do some really predictable things that cause the buyer to then feel uncertain and have to resist. Now, what's interesting in this market, one of my partners, Sarah, does a lot of work with multi-billion-dollar boards. And what she's saying is They've said to her in 2008, there were parts of our market that were certain and parts that were uncertain. Now we're looking, and pretty much everywhere is uncertain.
Uncertain. Yeah.
Half the economies on the planet, or half the countries on the planet, have a general election this year.
They do. Correct.
They're not necessarily going the way of liberal democracy. They're more going towards autocracy. We've heard that the Third World War is around the corner. I think it's already started. And Sunak talking about conscription. I predicted that about 18 months ago, because we've been moving towards the same sort of scenario where the lowbrow left and lowbrow right have stolen the center ground. You can't be a moderate, because if you are, you're shouted down. So they've muted all of those voices. And then 3% who are noisy on either end are driving the whole agenda. That's created a terrible environment for all of us.
Yeah.
But it also represents a reset. And I think that's our opportunity, because selling, we only have one role: empower others to make the right decision.
Yeah.
That is leadership. I think we have a moment in history where if you are in sales, you actually have a chance to affect the future by how you show up, your intent, by empowering other people to make good decisions well, that they can live with for a very long time.
Exactly.
My job. I've got nothing else to do.
Yep. Marcus, it's been amazing.
This has been so much fun. Let's try and get one of these out a month, because I bet there are 12 things that salespeople do that are a bit stupid.
Yeah, that'd be great. Always up for that. It's always a fascinating conversation. And yeah, I was a buyer for many years. And I was also a buyer in I did a procurement consultancy where we bought on behalf of big global corporates. So yeah, different perspectives. Lots of things we could talk about.
And there are two partners that I think I'll team you up with, who actually, with what you have and what I have, we might well have something quite spectacular.
That'd be good.
So Gal, listen out, and Rob, listen out. Pay attention. Speak to you soon. How can people get a hold of you?
So they can, best place is LinkedIn. So if you go onto LinkedIn, Mike Lander on LinkedIn, you can go there, or you can email me, mike@piscari, PIS for sugar, CARI.com. And or you can listen to my podcast. So Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast.
Excellent. And why Piscari?
Oh, wow. My wife created the brand about 10 years ago. It's to teach to fish. My whole raison d'etre is to pass on my skills and knowledge to others so they don't need me.
Fantastic. What a lovely ethos. Very similar to mine.
Yeah.
Excellent. Mike Lander, thank you.
Marcus, it's been amazing. Thank you.
So this is Marcus Cauchi signing off once again from the Inquisitor podcast. If you've enjoyed this, then please like, comment, share, tag somebody who needs to sell to procurement and probably isn't. I've learned a whole load of stuff, so I should be putting this through the AI so that I can improve my own thinking. And if you want to get hold of me, ping me on LinkedIn. But best thing to do, download the selling aptitude test. I built it so it compares you with the top 4% worldwide. Trust me, you're going to look ugly. That's the objective. It's not meant to be a pretty reflection. But what it does is it spits out enough information for us to build a learning pathway so that you can develop the skills that they have. Also, it will tell you your buyer safety score, what you do to put people off and cause people like Mike to ghost you or never buy from you. And it will also tell you what level of certainty you will have in your pipeline because of what you're doing. And I'll give you 30 minutes for free, no pressure. If you want to talk to me afterwards about coaching, do. I don't need more customers. I'd love to work with the right ones. So if you want my help, ask. I won't pitch you. I won't put you under any pressure, but you will get 30 minutes of the ugliest reflection that you've ever had, and it'll be fun. In the meantime, stay safe and happy selling. Bye-bye.